Welcome to Far East Wargaming, bringing you another Heresy Thursday. I'm Richard, your host, and once again joining us is Jason.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be back in another Heresy Thursday.
And this week we're bringing you another Army Legion review, and we've got the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, the Sons of Roboute Guilliman.
Yes, if you love vanilla ice cream, if you're very risk adverse, if you prefer stability in your life, these are the boys for you. No, I kid, I joke. But yeah, they're pretty good in 30K, and I actually like them a lot more in 30K than I like them in 40K.
Yes, they are yet to be the poster boys for 40K, because the poster boys for the Horus Heresy are the boys in yellow are Imperial Fists. But these are the Smurfs, as we fondly call them, in 40K, and this is... honestly, I like this Legion just in general. I like the color scheme. I like how relatively simplistic I think it is, and it's pretty straightforward to play. But let's get into how we normally approach these army reviews, and we're going to start with the Legion trait. And for the Ultramarines, that is the Strength of Wisdom. And this has changed slightly in this latest edition. And the way it reads is, when rolling to hit for a model with a special rule as part of a shooting attack, add +1 to the result of the roll if the enemy unit targeted by the attack has already been targeted by another friendly unit composed entirely of models with the same special rule in the same shooting phase, and if the attacking model is within 6 inches of a model from that friendly unit. This does not affect attacks made with blast or barrage special rules. So what this really is concentrating fire with the slight downside of having to be close to the unit that's already targeted. So you can't really do it from across the board.
Yeah, this requires a little bit of planning in your positioning and your list building, actually, because you kind of want to create these little clusters of units to kind of take advantage of this particular rule. But it's actually a really, really good one, right? Because you could have something like a simple Rhino shoot off its combi bolter, score the hit, and then now all of a sudden everything around within 6 inches of that Rhino is getting this bonus. It affects the unit the way it's written. So, for example, a vehicle squadron would be a unit, let's say 3 Predators or a couple Sicarans. So now all of a sudden all of those things get a +1 to hit it as well. So again, it doesn't say anything about you actually have to hit, and it doesn't say anything about you have to wound. So it's merely shooting at something actually triggers this, and that's really, really powerful. But like I said, you got to kind of build your list and do your army placement in the deployment phase or as you move. You got to really kind of take advantage of this and be kind of smart about it. But yeah, it's pretty easy to trigger. It's pretty powerful, adding that +1 to hit, making you effectively ballistic skill 5. It's a nice little Legion trait and easy to remember and use.
Well, the nice thing about this, as opposed to other Legion traits with +1 to hit for weapons, it's not restricted to any weapons other than blast and barrage, as opposed to the Imperial Fist, which was bolt and auto weapons. This can be any, your las cannon squad, your Volkite squad. It's making everything, basically, like you said, ballistic skill 5. It's super well thought out if you can place your entire army in a line and then work from one side to the other, and you have a shooting force. You're very strong to go up against in that respect. But also, since there is that 6-inch rule, you can isolate yourself. And I think I've seen this a couple of times where people isolate their heavy weapon squads at the back for that increased range with nothing else around them. And so you end up having to spend a lot of points to pair up similar weapon ranges.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I can think of a lot of ways to get around that, right? Like, let's say you take a Vigilator with his Nemesis bolter. You don't have to necessarily attach him to a unit, but you put him within that 6-inch proximity of a heavy support squad with las cannons. That's a pretty potent combo, and it kind of reduces the need for something like a Tech Marine or other ways to boost ballistic skill. Again, it's clever positioning, and I think even if you're playing aggressive with Ultramarines, you can, put different units in proximity to each other as you're going aggressive, or you're going up the board or toward objectives or whatnot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a thinking man's Legion of Special Rule if you think about it.
Yes, and it actually goes really well with their advance reaction, which is Unity of Purpose, and it kind of builds off this as well. So the advance reaction, may be used once per battle during the opponent player's shooting phase when an enemy player declares a shooting attack targeting a friendly unit under the reactive player's control, composed entirely of models with the Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule. Once the active player has resolved all 2-hit rolls, 2-wound rolls, and armor saves are made, but before damage mitigation rolls and casualties are removed, the reactive player may choose to expend one of their reactions for that phase to have both the unit targeted by the shooting attack and one other unit composed entirely of models with this Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule make a shooting attack targeting the unit that triggered this reaction, and following all the usual rules for shooting attacks. Any unit that makes a shooting attack as part of the Unity Purpose reaction may not make any indirect without line of sight, including barrage weapons or other weapons or special rules which ignore line of sight, and models with the vehicle unit type may only fire defensive weapons. In regards to template weapons, they may only be used if they are within 8 inches and must use the Wall of Death special rule, and also both the units making the shooting attack count as having made a reaction during that phase and may not make any further reactions.
This is really nasty, right? Because the way it's written, there's no restrictions in terms of the proximity of the second unit that's doing the reaction. So all of a sudden, your last cannon squad, if we come back to that example, that's on the other side of the table, as long as it can still obviously draw line of sight to the enemy unit that triggered this, now you're not safe from that, right? So really, your opponent has to be wary of this particular advanced reaction, because it can essentially delete whatever he shoots. And that's powerful, right? Because again, the restrictions are quite minor in terms of, barrage or not having line of sight weapons, or vehicles only firing defensive weapons. Frankly speaking, you're not probably using those for this type of reaction unless those vehicles are loaded up with defensive type weapons below strength 6. But your heavy support squads are really nasty with this, because they're almost always guaranteed to be able to return fire even when they're not shot at. So nice little advanced reaction.
Yep. And like I said, it can pair with the Strength of Wisdom trait if those two units are actually close enough together to warrant it there. So you can be making it easier to get that advance and reaction to hit. But yes, very powerful because of the lack of range requirement, just a line of sight requirement. And I think most people will be using it with their heavy support squads for this reaction here. And you tend to put them in line of sight of most things on the board anyway.
Yep, exactly. I like this one. I'd say this is, I'm not going to say it's top tier in terms of advanced reactions, but it's certainly strong and above average in my opinion.
So moving on, we'll move to the Ultramarines Warlord traits. And once again, we have 3 Warlord traits for the Ultramarines. 1 Loyalist Only, 1 Traitor Only, and 1 that is non-specific. And if we start with the Loyalist Only one, that is the Burden of Kings. And this is Loyalist Only, as I said. In any phase in which 1 or more wounds has been allocated to a Warlord with this trait, whether saved or unsaved, the Warlord gains the It Will Not Die 4+ and Fearless special rules until the end of the Warlord's controlling player's next turn. In addition, an army whose Warlord has this trait once in the opposing player's turn may make a single reaction without spending a point of the controlling player's reaction allotment, as long as the reaction is made by the Warlord or the unit he has joined, which basically means that you can choose which phase in the opponent's phase to have an extra reaction there.
Yeah, this makes your characters like really, really tough, right? I mean, a 4-up, It Will Not Die, that's a 50-50 chance of getting a wound back every single turn. We'll talk about war gear in just a minute, because this actually synchronizes really, really well with the mantle of Ultramar, which is one of the pieces of war gear that they can get. It makes them really, really tanky. And not much downside, honestly, to this. And that additional reaction point is just juicy, right? Gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of how you want to use that.
I like this, and if played correctly, it really does give some longevity to your Warlord, because really it's the fact it can be done in any phase, so it can be done multiple times. Once in your phase, once in the opponent's phase, in shooting or assault. And all you do is have to allocate a wound. So in shooting attack, since we allocate wounds now as we like, you can allocate a very soft wound to your Warlord to give him the It Will Not Die 4+. And I think more importantly, the Fearless special rule, which means that the unit can't be fleeing. So if you're suddenly targeted by your command squad, or your Warlord squad is targeted by some mass fire from Volkites or such, you just take one quick one on the Warlord. Likely more, just in general, because of the 2+ saves. But then there's no way that this unit's going to flee from casualties.
Which is true. Probably the one watch out here is just remember that if you are fearless, you can't shroud, right? So just be careful when you trigger this. If you plan on, or you're going to need a shroud later on or something like this, just be wary of that. Be careful of it. But yeah, this is a really strong Warlord trait.
That is a very good point. I didn't think of that. Moving
Hey,
on.
big brains.
Yeah.
Big brain
Moving on to the second Warlord trait, and this is the Loyalist or Traitor, so either or, and this is the Aegis of Wisdom. Any friendly unit made up entirely of models with the Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule that can draw line of sight to a Warlord with this Warlord trait may, when called upon to regroup, use the Warlord's leadership characteristic for that test, and if successful, the unit may make shooting attacks and declare charges as normal, ignoring the normal restrictions for units that have regrouped in the same phase. In addition, you get an extra reaction in the opponent player's shooting phase as long as the Warlord is alive.
Yeah, this is really powerful, right? Because it's line of sight, and in most cases, you're probably going to stick this on a leadership 10 character. And being able to affect multiple units of your army as long as they can draw a line of sight to them and they need to regroup, it's virtually guaranteed that they're going to regroup, right? It's like an 88% chance or whatever the math is. To me, this also downgrades the viability of a Delegatus in your list. Some people take a Delegatus to save on points, but also to do that auto regrouping little trick that he has. Now you can give a similar ability to your Warlord that isn't the Delegatus by taking this Warlord trait. So yeah, I think it's pretty powerful. And then of course, getting an extra shooting phase reaction is obviously always good.
Yep, the Delegatus has the Rally the Legion special rule, and that's once a game, I think, once per battle, yes, and it automatically passes. So it's slightly different, but if you're putting it on high leadership characters, and this is used all game for all regroups. Very powerful, again, depends very much on placement. I think that's a recurring theme for the Ultramarines and getting them efficient. It's how you place your army there.
Absolutely. Another good one, and I think that makes 2 out of 3 so far that are quite nice.
Yeah. The final one is slightly different. It's the Traitor Only, and it's Pride's Dark Power. And once per battle, a Warlord with this Warlord trait may, at the start of any one phase in either player's turn, choose to use his leadership characteristic in place of his toughness when resolving any to wound rolls made against it until the end of that phase. Thus, a Warlord with a leadership 10 has a toughness of 10 for that particular phase. In addition, you get an extra reaction in the opposing player's assault phase. This one here, quite unique. Very, very situational, in my opinion.
It's situational, but this is actually sneaky powerful, right? Because you can activate it for a phase, right? All of a sudden, your toughness 10. If for some reason you're in a position to be kind of tanking las cannon shots or something like this, or you're in combat, anything that's less than like strength 6 can't even wound you if you're toughness 10. I mean, heck, even a Contemptor against a Warlord with this particular trait activated is still only wounding on 5s with that strength 9 Gravis Fist. So you're right, it is situational, but I think it's one of those Warlord traits that if you pop it off at the right moment can be pretty devastating and really swing something in your favor.
Yeah, that situation against Contemptors is one that really springs to mind there, because Contemptors are the one things that are instant killing most characters, regardless of what armor they're in. They're usually relying on their invulnerable save, and with that brutal 3, that invulnerable save is honestly pretty useless at times, because as soon as you failed one of the three, you are dead here. This will allow you at least a turn of survivability, I would say, against something like a Contemptor or a Leviathan. And if you have the Thunderhammer in return, you're more than likely killing it in its response.
Yep, I do like it. Probably just the one watch out on this is just remember that if the character with this is embedded in a unit, like from a shooting attack, for example, and he activates this, it's still the majority toughness of the unit that gets shot at. So it's not like all of a sudden he makes the whole unit toughness 10. That's not the way it works. But in the situations where he's kind of by himself and you activate this, yeah, it's going to make it really, really strong.
Now, moving on to the rights of war, and the Ultramarines are pretty sparse in their rights of war, in the fact that they only have one, and that right of war is the Logos Lectora, but it is pretty versatile. So the effects are: at the beginning of each turn in which the controlling player of a detachment using this right of war is the active player, that player may select one of the Logos Lectora commands that follow, but may not select the same command twice in a row. However, each command may be selected more than once in a single battle, as long as it's not selected twice in a row without a different Logos Lectora command being selected before any command is repeated. The effects of this command are applied to all models within the army with the Legion Astartes Ultramarines special rule, and more importantly, infantry unit type, and last until the start of the controlling player's next active player turn. The 4 Logos Lectora commands are: the first one, Full March. All models with the infantry unit type and the Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule must increase their movement characteristic by +2, but reduce their ballistic skill and weapon skill characteristic by -1. The second is Hold Fast. All models with the infantry unit type and Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule must increase their leadership by +1 and may re-roll all failed to hit rolls during a shooting attack, but may not move or run in the movement phase. The third is Retribution Strike. All models with the infantry unit type and Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule must increase their weapon skill characteristics by +1 and gain an additional bonus of +1 to any charge rolls they make, but must reduce their ballistic skill by -1. And then the final command is Regroup. All models with the infantry unit type and Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule may re-roll failed leadership tests made to regroup when falling back, and any failed reserve rolls there. So those are all the bonuses, and there's actually only a few limitations, and those are: you must take an additional compulsory HQ, and that compulsory HQ must be a Master of Signals or a Legion Damocles Command Rhino. You must also take one additional compulsory troop choice, and finally, you may not be deployed using Infiltrate special rules or enter via Deep Strike Assault, Subterranean Assault, or Flanking Assault, and any units that must enter via such means cannot be selected.
Yeah, this one is really, really good. Even though it's the only Legion Rite of War for the Ultramarines, I mean, all of these effects, with the exception of maybe the regrouping, reroll, all of those are super powerful, right? So let's say, for example, you're running an assaulty Ultramarines list. You activate the first one on turn 1, where you get, +2 to your movement, so you're getting up to the board quicker. And then in the next phase, you activate the melee. Now, all of a sudden, your weapon skill +1, charge +1. You can be up in somebody's face relatively quick, and even your basic tactical dudes are now hitting on 3s. So that's a really, really nice combination. The one that is really gross is the fact that you can get basically full rerolls for your shooting. That's just nasty, right? So turn 1, you're unloading with your shooty army or your shooty elements. They're re-rolling all of their to-hit rolls. It's just gross. I mean, that's really, really gross. And the fact that you can do it more than once a game means you can actually pull off these combos or these individual effects more than once in the game. Kind of surprising that they actually didn't limit it to once per game for each one of these, but it's the way it's written. And then the downsides really are not downsides. I mean, let's be honest. no non-standard deployment, the deep striking, flanking, etc. Infiltrate might come to hurt you a little bit, like if you're running recon squads. And then the tax of a Master of Signals or Damocles Command Rhino. The Command Rhino is terrible. Don't take it. The Master of Signals is very useful. You're probably taking him and putting him in a shooty squad or something like this. So yeah, this is a really, really nice Legion Rite of War. I like this one a lot. I think it's pretty powerful, actually.
Yep, I think that the ability to select these more than once per game is strong, but I like the fact that they have limited it to not twice in a row, which means that it does mitigate some of that. I think if it was only once for each in a game, you would be either not selecting some or selecting some that have little purpose, and would make it, I think, a rather extremely ineffective Rite of War with not as many benefits. Being able to reroll shooting attacks once in a game, not great for that turn, but is it worth running a whole Rite of War for that? I don't think so. I like the regroup command in the sense that I think it be used quite poignantly at the end of a battle if you are losing at that point and lots of units are fleeing and you do have the last active player turn. You can more or less guarantee regrouping your units on the board to save some points there. And if you are using, I know that you can't use deep strike or sub or flanking assaults, but you're relying heavily, if you rely heavily on reserves due to a mission special rule, you can set it up so at the beginning of your second turn that more or less guarantees to come on.
Yep, fair points. All that is fair points. I think the reason why I thought the regrouping rerolls wasn't that strong is just coming back to the Warlord trait for Aegis of Wisdom, right? If your units are already using his Leadership 10 or Leadership 9, then chances are they're regrouping anyhow. But yeah, I get your point. I think the regrouping at the end of the game could be quite powerful. The other thing that I would probably say about this is it looks to me like it rewards flexible lists, which don't lean too heavy into one or the other, whether it's assaulting or shooting, right? Because to your point, if you're leaning heavily into one of those, you're not getting the benefit of some of these effects during the game. So if you've got kind of a balanced combined arms type force, this is definitely going to be very useful for you because every single one of these effects are going to be coming into play at some point during the game. So yeah, I really, really like this one. I think it's quite good. It's definitely another one of the thinking man's type of Rites of War special rule sets, because you're going to have to really kind of plan on which ones you use at which times.
Yep, and the way the Ultramarines have been written in terms of the special units they have access to that are actually outside the book as well in some of the erratas, is they are mainly focused to close combat versus shooting, all apart from one of them, which we'll talk about later. And so you can build yourself a very stable backline with the core troops, heavy support squads and such, tactical squads, while still having a very effective, or I'd say even extremely effective, close combat contingent to take advantage of the retribution strike rule there.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, just, again, that one effect for melee, for example, +1 to weapon skill. I mean, bumping up a command squad to weapon skill 6 or suzerains up to weapon skill 6. I mean, that's pretty powerful, right? Really, really like that one.
Yeah, weapon skill and the difference in weapon skill is really key in this edition. A 4 to 5 is already a big leap. And then when you're talking about elites versus elites, if suddenly your elites at 5 are having to hit on 5s, it's like going against a special character, a command character all the time for that one turn. Pretty painful.
Yeah, Praetor on Praetor, right? He's hitting you on 5s, you're hitting him on 3s. Pretty nasty.
Moving on, we'll move quickly into the Ultramarines Armory. And again, not too much compared to some of the other legions. They have one weapon, the Legatine Axe, and any model with any independent character special rule and the Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule may exchange a power axe for a Legatine Axe for a +5 points per model. It's a power weapon, strength user, AP2 melee, but most importantly, it's AP2 and not unwieldy.
Absolutely. I mean, it used to be Strength 5 and 1.0, if I remember correctly, which was pretty gross. Um, Initiative AP2 is just so uncommon, and so this is fantastic. If you're going to have a choppy character, it's also not a specialist weapon, right? So you can get the +1 bonus to having a pistol or something like this. Very, very nice little weapon. It's not expensive. There's really no reason not to put this on some of your characters, unless you want to go like on a Praetor with a Paragon Blade. It's debatable which one is going to be better, but probably the Paragon Blade with the strength bonus and murderous strike. And it's also worth noting that your suzerains come with these axes as standard. And I think you can even get access to it in a couple of the other units, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. Cheap, effective, great. Why wouldn't you take it?
Yeah, you're effectively giving up the +1 strength from a power axe to get rid of the unwieldy special rule, and I think that is a trade-off I would take any day.
Absolutely.
The second piece of war gear, and I'm probably going to butcher the way I pronounce this, is the Argurum pattern bordering shield there. Did I pronounce that right?
You're asking an American, so please, no. I'll go with your pronunciation.
So any model with the independent character and Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule that does not have the unique subtype may take this pattern boarding shield for plus 15 points. And the boarding shield provides a +5 invulnerable save against shooting attacks and a +4 against attacks made in assault. The invulnerable save can't be modified in any way, and if the model already has a invulnerable save, it must select which one it's using. And furthermore, if you're using this boarding shield, you may not use two-handed weapons.
This one is really good for a couple different reasons. Well, first of all, you can give it to console level characters, which normally can't get access to 4-up invulns. So that's one reason why it's good. The second reason why it's good is it doesn't say anything about turning you into heavy, which normal boarding shields do. And it also doesn't say anything about not allowing you to claim the bonus for 2 weapons. So it's a better boarding shield that makes your characters even more tanky, your console level characters even more tanky. Yeah, it's a nice little upgrade, and kind of like the Legatine Axe, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be taking this.
Yeah, you're right about the misses in how it's written. I would say rules as intended. It's supposed to act like a boarding shield in the sense that it takes up your offhand and you don't get a two weapon bonus. But again, the boarding shield does say that specifically, and this doesn't, as well as, more importantly, that heavy subtype, because that heavy subtype really limits your movement for what I consider a very small bonus of being able to re-roll saves against blast weapons. And honestly, I don't think they come up all that often.
No, they don't. Rules as intended, rules as written. I'm probably going to lean more on the side of rules as written, because this is also, if I'm not mistaken, equipping suzerains. So yeah, I mean, again, just clarify with your opponent if you have any debates about this, or those of you listening this far, if you have in the comments a different interpretation with references on how you got that interpretation, then yeah, please go ahead and put it in here.
And then the final piece of war gear is the mantles of Ultramar, and one Legion Praetor in a detachment may exchange their Artificer armor for one of the mantles of Ultramar for plus 25 points. And what this is, it conveys a +2 armor save, like Artificer armor, but in addition, it grants Battle Harden 1 special rule. Furthermore, that specific model is not affected by the blind special rule, but any unit it joins is.
This is, again, I mean, this is just making your guys even more tanky, right? I mean, who doesn't want Battle Hardened 1? It makes you immune to so many weapons in the Heresy, right? Missile launchers, tank them all day long on the 2-up, and even if you fail one, big deal, it's just a wound. Las cannons, tank a few of those. No reason not to take this. Probably, I think the only watch out on all this war gear is because it's so useful. It's going to make your characters more expensive, and all this stuff is going to obviously add up a lot. And if you are kind of like me that chooses boys before toys, I would probably rather have another, say, unit of tacticals rather than just loading up with all of these wherever I can. But again, your mileage may vary.
Yes, if you think about it, if you're taking just say a standard console, call it a Delegatus because you're trying to save points on. Well, actually, sorry, you can't. This has to be a Praetor. So you're adding 25 points to a Praetor to give it battle hardened. So you have a 4+ invul with now an effective toughness of 5 for instant death, and then you give him. Well, I don't think there'd be any need to give a Praetor a pattern boarding shield. So yeah, that can stack up across the army. On an individual model, I think this is a must-take in all honesty for a individual Praetor there, especially if you're running only just one. If you're running two, select which one you'd prefer.
Yeah, where I probably see the use of just coming back quickly to the boarding shield. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be sticking it on shooty type characters like that Master of Signals or something like this because it's only giving you the 4+ in close combat. But absolutely, if you're running a Legion champion or you're running a chaplain, any of those characters that you want, excuse me, up in the thick of things, that's where you're going to give the boarding shield and then the mantle if you decide to take a Praetor.
Yes, so that is all the war gear for the Ultramarines, and we got through that quite quickly because there's honestly not very much for the Ultramarines there. But as we do when we move on to the units, we always start with the big boy himself, the Primarch, and that is Roboute Guilliman for 465 points. The Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Victorious, the Master of Ultramar, Ruler of Hosts, the Blade of Unity. Also, what was it? The Emperor of Imperium Secundus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so many titles, so little time.
So, in terms of his stat line, it's pretty standard for some of the Praetors. It's movement 8, weapon skill 7, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, initiative, and attacks all of 6. Leadership 10, a 2+ save. His war gear is the Armour of Reason, the Gladius Incandor and the Hand of Dominion, the Arbitrator, which is his ranged weapon, a Cognus Signum, and frag grenades. For special rules, he has Adamantium Will 3+, Preternatural Strategy, Calculating Swordsman, and of course he is Loyalist. And for his Warlord trait, he has Sires of the Ultramarines. And all models with the Legion Astartes Ultramarine special rule in the army with Roboute Guilliman gain +1 to their leadership characteristic to a maximum of 10 while he's on the battlefield and not in reserve or removed as casualty. In addition, at the start of the battle before any models are deployed on the battlefield, an army with Roboute Guilliman as its warlord must select one of the following phases: movement, shooting, or assault. For the duration of the battle, any army with Roboute Guilliman as warlord gains an additional reaction in that chosen phase.
Where to start with Guilliman? I mean, he got a big glow up, I think, compared to 1.0. He's got so many abilities and he does so much to synergize and to boost the army. So like if we start about his warlord trait, I mean, that's +1 leadership to everyone. So that means all your basic dudes leadership 9, some of your other units are going up to leadership 10. That's pretty strong, pretty powerful. Being able to choose which phase you want to do your extra reaction in, also very, very powerful. Preternatural strategy is just ugly, right? When you combine it with the Logos Lectura, right? Because each turn he can pick Fleet 2, Counterattack 1, Furious Charge 1, Stubborn. And then if you combine that with the Logos, you can just create some nasty little combinations, right? So for example, you on the same turn that if you're running the Logos, you activate the one that gives you +1 weapon skill and +1 charge, and then you activate his ability for Furious Charge 1. Pretty strong, right? So just nice little combinations. He boosts so much of the army. No downsides for any of that. Really, really, really nice. And then if you talk about him in hand-to-hand by himself, his Gladius, which is his special sword, it's AP2 and it has Murderous Strike. It is master crafted, so that's pretty nice. Okay. But his hand, the big hand, is even nastier. It's strength 10, it's brutal 2, it's also master crafted. He has 2 specialist weapons because they both count as specialists. So he gets like 7 attacks base, 8 on the charge, so he can slap around a lot of stuff. And then finally, kind of like the icing on the cake, the fact that you get to ignore the first failed save, or excuse me, a reroll of your first failed save per phase. That's pretty nasty as well, because you're effectively giving him more wounds than he starts with that reroll, right? It's harder to kill him. Yeah, he's really, really good. And he synergizes so well with your army and synergizes so well with that single rite of war, creates a really, really powerful effect.
Yep, Roboute Guilliman is the true force multiplier for the Ultramarines. So for the Armour of Reason, which is his armor there, it allows him to re-roll the first failed invulnerable save, so not his 2+ save. But again, I think against a Primarch, most of the time you're being attacked by AP2 weaponry, so that's really where it comes into play here. And you're right, the preternatural strategies there synergize really well with every single one of the Logos Lectora. The speed, the fleet 2, synergizes, makes your units even faster if you go for their the full march there, where you're suddenly adding +2 to their run moves of fleet. The counterattack, again, very useful if you're on the defensive and you're getting charged by a lot of things. And I also really like the stubborn special rule. You've suddenly made potentially in the last turn, so you can't flee off your objective. That's a very powerful thing to do by making your entire army stubborn there. If they're holding the objectives during the last turn, even if it's a key thing about holding objectives in the final turn or the end of the game, this is extremely powerful. That last-ditch effort by the opponent to suddenly try and break you, to clinch victory from the jaws of defeat, is just no longer possible here.
Yeah, and it's probably also worth noting that his, preternatural strategy ability, it doesn't say you only get to use one of those again once per phase or once per game. You just can't use them 2 turns in a row. So just like the Logos Lectura effects, you can use these multiple times in the game as long as they're not, back-to-back phase, or excuse me, back-to-back turns. Very, very strong. He's a heavy hitter.
Yeah, I think the last point, his Arbitrator, is his N18-inch weapon. Strength 6, AP3, Assault 2, Rending 5+, and Mastercrafted. A little bit of icing on the cake. Again, I don't think any of the Primarchs are relying on their ranged weaponry in any real way. So nice to have, but not really key here. The final thing, he has the thing called Calculated Swordsman. And this one's a bit strange, because when fighting in a challenge, Roboute Guilliman may reroll all failed to hit rolls of 1 on the second and subsequent rounds of the challenge. So it's like in the first round, he's taking his time to figure out his opponent before taking advantage of things.
Yeah, and I mean, let's just be honest, this is only going to come into effect really when you're fighting against other Primarchs in a challenge. Because if you're fighting against most HQs, unless it's somebody like maybe a Sigismund or something like that, you're going to be smushing them turn 1 anyhow if you're using the fist with the brutal 2, strength 10. So yeah, it's a little bit situational, but it does mean that he can go toe-to-toe with a lot of the choppy Primarchs.
Well, so that's the Primarch, Roboute Guilliman. We'll move on to the next unit in the Liber Astartes, and that is an elite unit. And it's the Invictus Scissorin squad for 175 points for 5 models. Their stat line is movement 7, weapon skill 5, ballistic skill, strength, toughness 4, 2 wounds, initiative 4, 3 attacks base, a leadership of 9, and a +2 save. For war gear, they have a bolt pistol, the Legion-specific Legatine Axe, the Argrim pattern boarding shield, frag grenades, crack grenades, and artificer armor. And for special rules, they have the Lords of Ultramar and Honor Bearers. You can add an extra 5 Scissorins for 30 points each. Any Scissorin may exchange his bolt pistol for a plasma pistol for +10 points each. A bit expensive there, but any Scissorin can exchange their Legatine Axe for a Thunderhammer at 10 points each here. If we look at their special rules, Lords of Ultramar, any friendly unit made up entirely of models with the infantry or cavalry unit type, which is not pinned or falling back and does not include any models with this special rule, gains a +1 modifier to their leadership characteristic to a maximum of 9, while it has at least one model within 6 inches of a friendly unit that includes one or models with this special rule. And honor bearers really just means it can be a retinue with the ability to exchange a bolt pistol for a legion standard for 15 points here. I think these are some of the poster boys for the Ultramarines. They have some great models, but they're also really strong.
I would actually argue that they're underpointed, to be quite honest with you. I mean, yes, it's 175 points for 5, but they're weapon skill 5. They have AP2 at initiative with the axes. They have a ton of attacks. Their boarding shield, their special boarding shield, giving them a 4-up invuln in combat. Their line and their characters, which means they can take challenges and stuff like this. They have access to a land raider for transport if you want. I honestly think for all the rules and war gear that they get, they're probably a bit underpointed. But man, they're strong. They're so good. I mean, there's no reason not to take these and stick one of your characters with them. There's no reason not to take 10 of them. There's honestly, I've seen some lists that run 2 units of these, and they're incredibly difficult to actually chew through. And I actually played against an Ultramarines list that had multiple suzerain units in it at the last No Retreat. What's up, Yale? Shout out. And it takes forever to actually cut these things down, whether it's from shooting or from hand to hand. So yeah, really, really, really nice. And that AP2 at initiative, and even if you sprinkle in a couple Thunderhammers, they're not expensive at only 10 points each. Normally they would be like 15 points or 20 points even on some units. Sprinkle a couple of those in case you're going up against, Terminators, or you're going up against Contemptors or whatever else. Nice. I like these a lot.
Yep, it's the fact that they, first off, are line as a elite choice here, which is increasing your scoring ability. And you're right, they're each characters, so with 2 wounds, you can pass the wounds around with the way the rules are written for allocation of wounds right now. So you've effectively, even in a 5-man squad, you've got 4 free wounds, I'd say, before you're losing a model. Let alone if you bump that up to a full 10-man squad, you have 9 free wounds before losing a model there. It's very, very powerful here. They're given an effective 5+ invul save and a 4+ in close combat. So it's really making them Praetor-esque durability in close combat with that, or I'd say Terminator durability in close combat with that 4+ invul there. Very strong unit. I don't think it's wrong to argue that it might be a bit undercosted.
Yeah, and I mean, if I compare these against Terminators, there's no reason to take Terminators in an Ultramarines list, to be quite honest with you. These guys are getting the same type of invuln in close combat as a Cataphracti, 5-up when they're not in close combat. They all have a 2-up save. They all have AP2 initiative weapons. Yeah, I mean, this is the reason why you don't probably see a lot of Terminators in Ultramarines lists, because these guys do the same job, and in some ways they actually do it better, and their line. So nice little package.
Well, moving on to the second unit, they've got a little brother, I think, for the Invictarius Suzerain squad there, and that's the Praetorian Breacher squad for 135 models. Again, it's a 5-man unit with 4 Praetorians and 1 Praetorian Primus, and stat lines for these are movement 7, weapon skill 5, ballistic skill, strength, and toughness of 4. Once again, 2 wounds each, initiative 4. The standard Praetorian has only 1 attack, with the Primus having 2, and a leadership skill of 8 with a 3+ save. Their war gear, coming as standard, is a power sword, bolt pistol, boarding shield, frag grenades, crack grenades, and power armor. They are all chosen warriors, and they gain the Hammer of Wrath 1. They are a heavy elite line unit. And again, the Primus is a character as well. They can add up to 5 more for 22 points per model. They can add a Nuncio Vox or a Legion Vexilla for 10 each. For every 5 models, you may upgrade a Power Sword to a Legantine Axe. The Primus may upgrade his Power Sword to a Power Fist for 15 points or a Legantine Axe for 5. The Primus may also upgrade to a Plasma Pistol for 10 points. And he may upgrade to Artificer for another 10. Once again, for dedicated transports, these guys can take a Land Raider Proteus if they so choose.
The problem with these guys, because I actually think they're pretty good, right? The 2 wounds, the weapon skill 5, the fact that you can get a couple axes for that AP2 at initiative, you get some free extra hits with Hammer of Wrath if you charge in. The problem with these guys is suzerains, because suzerains are not that much more expensive, and you just get so much more out of the suzerains. Yeah, I mean, that's what works against them, right? Which is a shame, because the theme of the Ultramarines being able to take lots of breachers and stuff like that, I think it's really, really cool, and kind of, you know, the Roman theme of the Ultramarines as well. But if you're looking at this outside of rule of cool or fluff or theme, and you're the kind of person that's building lists that are strong, there's no reason to take these. You might as well just pay the extra 25-point tax, something like that. It's really low, and just get the suzerain.
Yep, it's a 40 point difference there, and an 8 point per model difference for Suzerain. You're right, that's probably why you really rarely see these guys on the board, because the Suzerain are just better in every way. Yeah, there's no reason. If this was a Breacher-sized squad in Elite, so a 10-man squad instead of a 5-man squad, for only a bit more than a Breacher squad, then I would understand it being chosen. Or again, if this was put as a troops selection as opposed to a valuable elite slot, and was slightly more expensive than the 150-point Breacher squad, then I would see its use. But if I was looking at these guys over a Breacher squad, it's 135 points for 5 instead of 150 points for 10 here. And yes, you're getting a better weapon skill and access to a couple extra close combat weapons. But I think what you're also losing is access to that long-ranged weaponry that the Breacher squads have.
Yep, which is very true. And I mean, again, the basic guys in this squad only have 1 attack. And because of the boarding shield, you can never get the 2 weapon bonus that suzerains can get. So you're kind of wasting that weapon skill 5, and you're wasting some of those axe attacks unless you're charging. Yeah, I mean, it's just a shame. And I mean, the upgrade kit from Forgeworld, the shields are really, really nice. So these look really, really good on the table, but it's just the suzerains are just better. So you're going to go with those almost every single time.
Yep, I think what you'll see is I think people will be buying those upgrade kits just to put on their normal breachers, just because, again, rule of cool, they look awesome, and not really running them with the close combat weapons that come with it, or saving the close combat weapons that come with this upgrade kit to put on characters, because they do come with some very nice axes.
I've just seen some really cool conversions actually using this kit to make your own suzerains. If you want to save money, and let's face it, who doesn't? You can take your plastic Mark IIIs, you can take this upgrade kit, maybe put out some blinged helmets if you've got access to the Ultramarine helmets, or you've got even some friends with 40k Ultramarine bits, because there's the winged helmet, I think in the old 40k Command Squad, and maybe in the old 40k Ultramarines kits. You can very easily make a plastic version of suzerains using this and trading for the appropriate bits, and save your money that way. So that's also an option.
Yeah, I would, like I said, I think they would have got more legs or more visibility of these guys if they were in a different slot. Taking up that valuable elite slot where you're looking to really always min-max your selections there, there's no logical reason to take these over Suzerain.
Nope, not at all.
Well, that's the last unit. Unit in the book other than the character, and so let's dive into the HQ that's available in the Liber Astartes, and that is Remis Venatus for 175 points. He's the commander of the 4th company of the 1st chapter of the Ultramarines Legion, the savior of Calth. And his profile is movement 7, weapon skill and ballistic skill 5, strength, toughness, and wounds of 4, initiative 5, 3 attacks, leadership 10, and a +2 save. He is a unique character. For his war gear, he has an iron halo, a Phaethon, a bolt pistol, Nuncio Vox, melter bombs, frag grenades, crack grenades, a Legion standard, and Artificer armor. His unique Warlord trait is Resolute Planning, and this says both Remis Venatus and any unit composed entirely of models with the Legion Astartes special rule in an army with him as its Warlord automatically passes leadership tests or morale checks made while they have at least one model within 3 inches of an objective. In addition, he gets an extra reaction in the opposing player's movement phase, and that's pretty strong. And his weapon, the Pantheon, is a strength user AP3 melee weapon with rending 5+ and master crafted. I think finally, standard, he's a loyalist only with adamantium will 3+ here. Not the most powerful character in terms of his individual ability, but again, for Ultramarines, we're talking about force multiplication, and he fits that role perfectly.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was just going to say. I mean, you're not taking him, he's not a bad hand-to-hand character per se, but relying on a rending 5+ on his weapon means you're going to be struggling against 2+ saves. But that Warlord trait is just amazing. Auto-passing leadership and morale checks when you're next to objectives. The fact that he has a Legion standard and it can turn another unit into line. I mean, the one thing that also sticks out about the Ultramarines is a huge strength is you just have access to so many scoring units, either through the special units or guys like him. You can essentially make easily a Ultramarines list that has 6, 7, 8 line units scoring, and then all of a sudden any of those on objectives just get even harder. And then mix in some apothecaries, man, you can make like a really, really rock hard list that is really, really hard to shift once it's on objectives, and it's going to be scoring a lot of points. I like him. I like the model. Yeah, he's not a bad choice at all.
Yeah, having to have only one model within 3 inches of an objective gives a lot of versatility. Again, we don't have objectives in 30k as large as the 40k massive circles. We're using more, I think, small coin bases, 32 mils, things like this. So it is a smaller area. But most of the games are objective based, and if you combine this with everything else that Ultramarines have, plus tactical Marines, Heart of the Legion, say with apothecaries, you're suddenly getting something that's never going to flee with a 4+ feel no pain when it's close to an objective with an apothecary there. And then if you're looking at the other units, so the other elites there, they're just very hard to shift as soon as they're in position that they want to be in.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's everything in the Liber Astartes, but the Ultramarines do have a few other units, several in the Legacies and one in the Exemplary Battle units. I think let's approach the Exemplary Battle units because this is one of the newer ones that they've brought out here. And it's the Ultramarines Nemesis Destroyer Squad for 165 points. And this is a 10-man Destroyer Squad with characteristics of Movement 7, Weapon Skills, Ballistic Skill, Strength, Toughness of 4, only 1 wound, Initiative 4. The Standard Destroyer has 1 attack with 2 on the Sergeant, and Leadership 7 and 8 respectively, and 3+ saves. The war gear for these guys is they have a special mortar-fire bolter, a bolt pistol, chainsword, frag grenades, crack grenades, rad grenades, power armor. Their special rules are stubborn, counterattack 1, and bitter duty, like most of the other destroyers. They also can add up to 10 more destroyers for 15 points each. They can add a Legion Vexillor or a Nuncio Vox for 10 points a model. For every 5 models in the unit, one of them may exchange their Mortar-Fire Bolter for either a Missile Launcher, a Heavy Bolter, Volkite Charger, Flamer, Melter Gun, Plasma Gun, Graviton Gun, or Las Cutter. And the Sergeant may upgrade his Chainsword to a Power Weapon, Power Fist, Lightning Claw, or Thunderhammer, and the Thunderhammer is an expensive 20 points, as well as upgrading the Sergeant's Ardor to Artificer for an extra 10, and the Sergeant can also take a single Phosphex bomb and Melter bombs for 5+ there. And I think really the unique thing about these guys comes down to their Mortar-Fire Bolter. It's shorter range than a standard bolter, 18-inch range, strength 4, AP 5, assault 2, however, but it has the special rule called the Harrower, and what this means is any unit from which a model is removed as a casualty during the shooting phase as a result of an attack from this weapon with the special rule must take a morale check as if it had suffered 25% casualties. And I think it's for this rule that you take this unit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to take destroyers anyhow, you might as well take these because it's a similar cost. That little special bolter being assault 2 means that it doesn't stop you from actually shooting and charging, which is nice. You get most of the same effects and rules as regular destroyers, and you're really not paying much of a premium for that bolter if you look at the points, right? I like it. I think it's a useful squad. If you're going to take destroyers, you might as well take this. Most of the upgrades are going to be similar to destroyers, although I think you get access to a few more of the weapons on the regular squad here than a normal destroyer squad would get. Thunderhammer on the Sergeant is not a bad choice if you have the points, but let's face it, 20 points for a one wound character or a one wound non-character model is always a bit iffy if you want to go that route. But yeah, if you were going to play destroyers anyhow, you might as well use these and get the extra little bonus.
Well, if you look at it, it's 60 points more for this unit as opposed to a standard Legion Mortalis Destroyer squad. But for that 60 points, you're getting 5 extra models with the ability to have up to 10 extra. And whereas a normal Destroyer squad is limited to 10 there. So really, you aren't paying very much more for this full 10-man squad. Thunderhammer is slightly cheaper on the Sergeant. But the fact is, you're getting that bolter instead of 2 bolt pistols there, which really makes it for me here. I think if you're taking destroyers, you're right. This 10-man squad is something you take over a standard 5-man squad there. But the only downside, I think, is they aren't jump packs, so they're not assault destroyers.
Agree. I think the other downside that I was going to mention is that they're in the elite slot, like other destroyers, right? And with the Ultramarines in particular, with the Suzerains, with Contemptors, with Apothecaries, you're competing in that crowded slot with these guys. Would I take these over those other options? Absolutely not, unless I was playing, more fun, more fluffy, of course. They just compete with a lot of other really, really good choices, so that's a bit of a downside as well. But hey, again, if you were going to take destroyers anyhow, you might as well take these.
Yep, I think you're right there. It's just because of how low priced the Scissorin are and how effective they are. It really, honestly, even taking a Contemptor instead of another Scissorin squad would be a valid toss up there, just because of how good it is especially for the points you're paying for that squad, and opposed to the points you're paying for a Contemptor there. They're really similar priced.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, well that's the exemplary battle units, so the latest units they've got. But they've also got a few in the legacies. Some are pretty mediocre, some are actually pretty good and maybe have been taken down a notch because they were too good there. But if we look at the legacies units, the first one, again, we're filling the elite slots here for the first 2. And this is one I always question when I'm looking at this type of character in any of the legacies here. And it's Honored Telemachus, which is a Contemptor for 220 points. And he has been modified slightly in the latest update. He's got a movement of 8, weapon skill, ballistic skill of 5, strength 7, toughness 7, 7 wounds, initiative 4, and 4 attacks with a leadership of 10 and a +2 save. He comes with a Kerry's assault cannon, a Gravis power fist with a combi bolter, and an atomic deflector. He has hatred of everything, which I think is his main bonus here, and he's loyalist only. But to me, for 220 points, he's just not worth it.
Well, I'm a little bit mixed on this because he got he got changed, right? Originally, when the legacies came out, he was weapon skill 6, which was huge because that means he's hitting other contemptors on threes. They're hitting him on fives. They bumped it down to weapon skill 5. They also adjusted his points downwards because he used to cost 240. What you get for those points in a in addition to what a normal contemptor would get, he has 7 wounds instead of 6. So you get 1 extra wound. He has base 4 attacks, whereas a standard contemptor only has base 3 unless it has 2 fists. And then he gets the hatred, so the rerolls to hit. Um, I don't think he's bad. If you're going to take a contemptor, you can pay a little bit extra and get him. I think what actually lets him down is the Carries Assault Cannon, which isn't a bad weapon at all, but it's just outclassed by the Gravis Melta. It's outclassed, obviously, by the Gravis Las Cannon. But again, if you're planning on playing aggressive with the Contemptor, he's not necessarily a bad choice because he's a little bit more durable and a little bit more punchy than that other Contemptor would be.
For me, one of the other big downsides is, again, because we're talking about the elite slot, and we're talking about efficiency for this valuable slot here. Other Contemptors can take 3 in a Talon. He's all alone. So yes, he's 220 points, but he's filling up a slot where potentially you could fit 3 Contemptors if you so chose to do that and you were that ruthless. I just don't think it's a very efficient slot usage for the Ultramarines. Not saying you should fill all slots with Scissorin, but why the hell not?
Agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I would just say compared to like a couple of the other legacy contemptors, character contemptors, what's the guy from the EC? You know who
Rylanor.
this is.
Jesus.
Rylanor, yes. Rylanor is abysmal. At least Telemachus is usable.
Yeah. The second one in the legacies, and I think this is honestly more a fun one, and it has been touched down a tiny bit there. And this is the iconic Fulmentaris Terminator squad for 290 points for 5 models. They are movement 6, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill of 5, strength and toughness of 4, 2 wounds, initiative 4, 2 attacks for the Terminator and 3 for the Decurion, and leadership 7 and 8 respectively, with 2+ saves. They are in Cataphractite Terminator armor, and they have Combi Bolters, the Fulmentaris missile array with Splinter and Hellfire plasma missiles, and the Peritarch Targeter here. They have the standard rules for Terminators, inexorable, bulky, but they also have Fire Protocols 2, and you can add up to 5 more for 55 points per model. And you can get a power weapon instead of the Targeter for free if you wanted to do that, or upgrade them to Power Fists or Chain Fists, and the Decurion can exchange his power weapon for a Thunder Hammer there. But I think it really comes down to their Fulmentaris missile array.
Yeah, these guys got tweaked quite a bit. So one of the tweaks is you have to exchange the Targeter in order to get a close combat weapon. So for example, a power weapon, Power Fist, or Chain Fist. And the Targeter is actually quite good because what the rule is for it is it grants you basically night vision, and your shooting attacks are twin linked when you activate it at the start of any of your controlling turns before any models are moved. Once you activate the Targeter, you can't move yourself. So having to give that up, and that's pretty potent, right? Night vision. Again, don't forget, night vision prevents enemies from shrouding on you. Twin linked on the shooting. I wouldn't give up that Targeter for a close combat weapon, to be quite honest with you, because you want these guys shooting. And the reason why you want them shooting is because of their missile array. Their missile array did get tweaked. It has 2 weapon types. It has Splinter missiles, which are 36-inch range, strength 4, AP 5, heavy 4 pinning. So even 5 of these guys spit out a ton of shots. And if you're using the Targeter, those are going to be twin linked if you sit still. Good option. You're almost guaranteed to trigger a pinning attack with that. I've seen it happen. I've played against it. The Hellfire plasma missiles also got tweaked because when this unit first came out of Legacies, they were only 24-inch range, but they had all kinds of stupid rules about not needing line of sight, and they were strength 8 AP2, and they were brutal 2. They were just busted, I'm sorry. But now they've changed it. They've increased the range to 36 inches. They've down, the strength is 7 instead of 8. The AP is only 4, and they only have 1 shot each, but it's breaching 4 up. So if you're using these with the targeter, there's a good chance you're going to score quite a lot of hits, and probably 50% of those hits are going to turn into breaching. So um, I think they needed the nerf that they got because the original version was just ugly, and in Zone Mortalis was completely broken with the not needing the line of sight. Um, Still very, very, very much usable, but not OP in my opinion. Probably the biggest weakness on these things is going to be the lack of really close combat. But again, you don't really want them in close combat. And then the points. I mean, it's 290 for 5 of them, and then each additional model is 55. So that's quite a lot. If you decide to run a 10-man block of these things, you're talking over 500 points.
Yeah, they are very expensive. They're 115 points more than a standard Cataphractite Terminator squad. Yes, they have considerably more shooting, but that's still just nearly double the price of a Cataphractite squad there, with no close combat ability that you honestly shouldn't be giving them anyway. Would you take these over a 10-man las cannon squad? I don't know.
No, I wouldn't. Would I take a 5-man squad of these in a Zone Mortalis game? Absolutely. They're still quite good with that 36-inch range and then triggering the pinning and stuff like this. So yeah, I mean, they did get a needed nerf, but they're not unusable like some voices on the internet are saying. They were really, really broken before. I'm sorry.
I'm going to disagree with you in Zone Mortalis, because the Zone Mortalis games I think we've played ourselves on the channel, and the games I've seen played myself, that it's close combat that's the biggest thing as opposed to shooting. Because 36-inch range is great when you have line of sight available, but they're no longer guided weapons anymore. So you still need that full line of sight, and you're never going to get the effective 36 range line of sight needed to really take use of these before being charged by something that infiltrates or comes in from the side in most of the Zone Mortalis games. I think you can see. I think I'd see these played a bit more in open play. A Centurion-esque game would be very effective for these guys. But in Zone Mortalis, they're now suffering from the really big downside. As soon as they're in close combat, these guys are basically dead.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of pinning, right? And with how many shots, potentially twin link, that these guys can spit out, I think it still has value in Zone Mortalis. And I think anything that has a breaching or a rending of 4 up is still pretty strong, right? So obviously in Zone Mortalis, you're not going to be just running these things up the table. You're going to be actually sticking them behind even a tac squad, right? So that there's at least some sort of speed bump or something in between them and their target. If you do decide to give up the targeter, it's not actually necessarily a bad thing, because power weapons are free. Power fists are only 5 points. I could still see a value doing that and just foregoing the twin linked to give them a little bit close combat punch.
Yes, I agree, and I think the final point is that for Zone Mortalis, you are working off the limitation of reinforcement points as opposed to army points there. So maybe having that 290 point sink isn't as big of a downside in a Zone Mortalis game.
Yeah, and just one last thing that just sticks out because I didn't catch it the first time was the Decurion and the Sergeant can take a Thunderhammer. So also ups the combat potential a little bit. And they're ballistic skill 5, so you could forego the targeter and the twin links because in most cases you're going to be hitting on 2s anyhow.
The final unit in the Legacies is a fast attack unit, which is rarer to see. We're not seeing this slot filled all that often. And this is a Locutarus Storm Squad for 195 points for 5 models. And their profile is movement 7, weapon skill 5, ballistic skill, strength, and toughness of 4, 2 wounds each, initiative 4, 2 attacks for the standard Locutarus, and 3 for its strike leader, and leadership 8 and 9 respectively, with a 2+ armor save. They have bolt pistols, Argrim power swords, Legion Warhawk jump packs, Artificer armor, frag grenades, and crack grenades. For special rules, the Loyalist Only are chosen warriors, and the Blade of Wisdom is another one of their special rules. You can add up to another 5 for 25 points each, and for every 5 models in the unit, you can exchange one of their bolt pistols for a plasma pistol, a Volkite Serpenter, or a hand flamer. And the strike leader can upgrade to a power axe for free, or a Lightning Claw, a Legatine Axe for only 5 points, a Power Fist or a Thunder Hammer for 15 points there, as well as upgrading his Bolt Pistol for a Plasma Pistol, Volkite, Serpenta, or Hand Flamer. And finally, the Strike Leader can take a Combat Shield or Melter Bombs.
You get a lot of extra stuff in the points, right? Weapon skill 5, great. 2 wounds, great. 2 up invuln for Artificer with everybody, great. 2 attacks base, 3 on the Strike Leader, that's also very, very good. Their special Power Sword is very interesting, right? Because it's essentially the same as a regular Power Sword. It's Strength User AP 3, but it has Rending 5 up, and it has Duelist Edge 1, so that helps you in challenges. So because of the number of attacks that these guys can get on the charge with their close combat bonus for 2 weapons, charge bonus, you have a lot of chances to trigger that Rending. And with the weapon skill 5, you're going to be hitting a lot of the time on 3s. Pretty good. And then the leader, the Strike Leader, can get Fist, Legatine Axe, Thunder Hammer. It's debatable whether the Axe or the Thunder Hammer, which way you want to go. The Axe is so cheap at 5 points. The Thunder Hammer is only 15. Those are really, really good options. And then that special rule that they have, the Blade of Wisdom, is pretty interesting, because what it says is if you roll to hit a model with this special rule as part of an attack with a melee weapon on a turn in which you successfully charged, you get to add +1 to the result of the roll if that unit has already been shot at by another friendly Ultramarines unit in the preceding shooting phase. That's pretty nasty, right? And again, it kind of encourages that little combined arms approach. 1 unit shoots at your target, hopefully not taking you out of charge range. You charge in successfully. You're hitting on 3s, and then you get a +1 to that roll. You're hitting on 2s in many cases. Pretty good. And those swords, like I said, are pretty good as well, with just the number of attacks that you get. You're going to trigger roughly 1/3 of your successful hits into Rens.
Yep, nice. 190 points for 5 is again on the pricier side. But again, we're filling a slot which is underutilized in most armies, and that's the fast attack slot. So again, if you have the points to spend, and this is a very effective way of doing that.
Agree. I like these. I've actually converted some up for my own Ultramarines list. I haven't painted it yet, but I do think that they're very, very useful, and it's just another good close combat option in the fast attack slot, as you mentioned, and they will do some work. They've got some punch.
Well, look, that sums up our army review for the 13th Legion Ultramarines there. Honestly, I like the Ultramarines a lot. They are a relatively good force for a beginner to the Horus Heresy to take, because there's very little rules, very little overlapping rules for this as well. And I think it's a simpler force to play. Not the simplest force to play, but I'd put it up there in the Loyalist as on par with the simplicity of the Iron Warriors for the Traitors.
Yeah, I like the Ultramarines because they're one of those legions that you can really kind of do whatever you like, right? Unlike some other legions that tend to lean more heavy into shooting or tend to lean more heavy into melee, the Ultramarines can do it all, right? And there's just so many opportunities for synergy. It kind of rewards careful planning, careful placement, your list building. I like legions that also require a little bit of thinking. So yeah, I really, really enjoy these. And I think that the 30K color scheme is much better than the 40K. Fight me on that.
I will say that for a beginner coming into the Horus Heresy or coming into Warhammer 30K, that yes, this is a rather simple force to build and paint if you so choose to. But it is also something that is going to require you to get Forgeworld, because if you're not getting those Scissorin, you aren't using the full capabilities of this force, and you're really wasting the choice of why you choose this army here. They should be in every list. As boring as that sounds to say, it's just very effective and points effective, and just smart to include at least one unit of these in every list. And sadly, even if you're doing it just on the upgrade kit, you're playing around with Forgeworld resin.
Yes, this is true. But again, I mean, there's also the hobbyist in me. When I converted my own Ultramarines, I leaned so heavy into 40K bits and stuff like that. So my suzerains are converted, my Locutarus is converted, I made Fulmentaris. You can do it and save some money. I just like that aspect of it as well. I mean, there's a lot of modeling options with these guys. You can do everything from lean into the Roman theme to Calth survivors to a destroyer company. Yeah, pretty cool. I like this Legion a lot.
I think one thing I actually forgot to mention when we talk about Roboute Guilliman is that he is a great model. Sorry, he's a great character, but I think he was one of the early models. And personally, I think he's a bit dated when we're looking at all the newer Primarchs coming out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I could see a path where GW actually redoes him, based on kind of the Imperium Secundus when he tried to with Sanguinius and with the Lion. Yeah, when they tried to do that, I mean, that would be a great excuse to kind of do a new version of him that might be a little bit better looking. But it's not a bad looking model. But you're right, it does kind of drop off a little bit compared to the more recent offerings.
Well, look, if you stuck with us till the end of this army review, thank you very much, and I hope it was informative. If we did get anything wrong or you thought of something different, please let us know in the comments. We're always happy to respond and have a debate down there. And once again, if you're not already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and the bell and like icons. It helps us grow as a channel and helps us with the ever elusive YouTube algorithm so we can keep getting motivated us at Far East Wargaming to keep bringing you these videos on a weekly basis here. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in from me, Richard. I'll see you next week. Jason, any final words?
Nope, not at all. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Keep the comments and whatnot coming in, and we will catch you on the next one.